I'm Daniel Kovarek, the instructor of this course. I'm a postdoctoral research fellow at the European University Institute in Florence, Italy, where I mostly do research on the intersection of political geography, distributive politics, voting behavior, and for that I mostly apply experimental survey, a bit of text and data, and also big data methods. So for all of these tasks and for all of these data analytical um, challenges that life throws at my way, I've been using R for at least a decade or so by now. So it's great pleasure that I have the chance to teach this course again in collaboration with MethodsNET and the Central European University in Vienna. Now I'll try to very briefly give you an introduction or an overview of how this course will look like, because we assume or we hope that you at least partly join because you're interested in taking this course, and to join us for the this year's iteration and edition of the MethodsNet Summer School. And then I also show you some quick examples of basically by the end of this course, where can you get at, what can you achieve, and what can you do with, say, data visualization or in terms of statistical analysis or anything like that. Feel free to interrupt me at any time. So we should have the raise hand function. So just notify us if you have a question. I'm anyway not a lecture person, and the course itself in the summer will be very interactive, so I'm not trying to lecture here. There will be a dedicated Q&A after like 35 or 40 minutes or so, but also at any time if something is unclear or you have a follow-up question, a 2 cent, a contribution, something, please raise your hand and just ask me about it. Hopefully you can see my slides, I hope. Then I can quickly run through how the structure of the course looks like and what are the, so to say, goals and aims of this short course. Now this introduction to our course is first of all designed for people who have absolutely no familiarity or previous exposure to any programming or statistical courses. So don't be shy and don't be afraid if you're someone who didn't get your hands dirty with other programming languages before, or if you feel that your only stats course was, I don't know, 10, 15 years ago. This is not a problem at all. The whole purpose and so to say beauty of this course is that it gets together people of very different, both substantive but also methodological backgrounds, who are like trying to learn R from scratch and from the very basics. And so for that, we usually have based on the previous iterations of the course is a very, very diverse cohort, which I find particularly enriching and useful. So usually it's a very nice peer feedback and community of learning environment when, I don't know, some more senior faculty and undergrads are helping each other, because everyone is really starting from the beginner level. So again, if you never had previous exposure to R, or you feel that any other related courses, say in statistics or maybe focused on SPSS or Stata or anything like that, were, I don't know, a decade ago, then absolutely you don't have to worry, because the course is designed in a way that it really assumes no prerequisites and no familiarity with other programming languages or so to say other methodological courses. Now it's also ideal for the two special cases which I just put up to the slide and wanted to mention. One is that if you're taking other courses with us in the MethodsNet Summer School, for instance, in week 2, some of them might be running in R, say courses focused on text analysis, web scraping, large language models, AI, whatnot. So if you're taking any of those courses and they might say that, familiarity with R is assumed, then it's a great idea to take this course beforehand, come a week earlier, and then just be fully prepared and fully packed with fresh new information on how to use R by the time your more substantive, more topic focused course starts, where you're supposed to apply or at least follow the course with R. Now, the course is also great for those who might have some programming experience with other languages, or they might have had been taught some sort of other statistical software during their undergrad or bachelor studies or whatnot. And now they just want to make the transition, either because R is free and open source and reproducible, whereas all of these other softwares are expecting either you or your department and university to pay a substantial chunk and amount of money. I think one of the funniest motivation or drive, so to say, to take this course I witnessed in the past was there was a guy, I think he was either an assistant professor or a postdoc who just wanted to, basically he was trying to back his department to get his Stata updated with the new version, the new license. And then the department said that basically the new license would be more costly than just sending the guy to come up with us and learn how to do the same stuff in R, which is free. So I think that's a great motivation if you don't want to be dependent on heavily paywalled and very expensive proprietary software, and instead of want to do something which is reproducible, which is open source, and which is always free, then taking this course and generally making a move or making a transition to R is definitely a way to do, or a great way to do that. Okay, now how basically what topics we cover and how this course is structured. During the 5 days, um, we will get from, so to say, the very basics and the fundamentals to the level where you'll be able to produce your own research paper, report, or note fully in R, both the text, the corresponding, say, output, statistical output, tabular output, and also the corresponding data visualization. So what we do in day one is we really start from basically the very simple questions like how you get data into R, how you export data out of R, how to perform very basic operations, and then kind of understand what are the essential data types and data structures that R is using and working with. But already in day one, we'll have, so to say, some sneak peeks or very superficial understandings of relationships or patterns, because by the end of the first day, you'll be able to produce a scatter plot or maybe a histogram, which will tell you something about your data structure when it comes to certain variables, certain patterns that might interest you. We do offer and work with a bunch of pre-processed data sets, which are neat and clean, high quality survey data, cross-national data, data sets produced by expert coding and so forth. But we are also very much open to help you out with your own data. So usually how the course proceeds is that by day 2 or day 3, some questions come up about certain very particular problems that might characterize your fieldwork, your own data. And then I'm, of course, very happy to help with that and to sort out. Also, some of these examples might be helpful for your colleagues. And that's why I said that the peer feedback is a very, so to say, quintessential part of this experience, because all of you start from the very basics, and then all of you will have strengths in very different areas, both substantively and when it comes to certain aspects of programming. So you can also help each other, but also I'll be, and potentially a teaching assistant will be there to help out with that. Now, moving on to day 2 is when what we call the data wrangling starts. So a large chunk of research, and probably for those of you who are moving or transitioning from other statistical software or from has some previous exposure to quantitative research already know this. A large chunk of research is actually not necessarily running the analysis. but shaping and making sure that the data set is usable and viable and ready to be used for our research purposes. So the day two exercises and the day two fundamentals are effectively revolving around that: how to convert a long data frame to a wide one, how to clean a data set, how to merge certain different data sets. Maybe you only want to keep a certain range of columns, variables. So maybe you want to subset your data, maybe you want to filter your data. You only need certain observations, but not all. So all of these transformations and selections is something that we cover and learn on day two, as well as how to rename, recode variables, say generate dichotomous variables, dummies, which will be very essential if you're someone who's going to use R for statistical purposes, but also how to handle duplicates and identify, say, missing data patterns and any other things which might either go wrong or could be off in your data by design. So how to handle any anomalies, which are basically the built-in features of real-world observational noisy data. Now moving on to day three, once we have a good grip of how to reshape, recode, and merge and split our datasets, we can actually use them to run and conduct some sort of analysis on them. This course is, as I said, does not assume statistical knowledge, but also we don't go very deep into that. So if you're only interested in, so to say, how to do applied statistics, this course might not be the best for you. But if you're someone who will later on, so to say, with a strong base core knowledge of R, will want to build on it, then probably this is the fundamental course you want to take. So what we'll cover is ordinary least squares regression, also comparing means, t-tests, and so forth. And also the emphasis in this course will be about how to basically make your regression results, your outputs, into presentable. So we'll give you and provide you the tools to produce report ready or publication ready outputs, which are well formatted, neat, and tidy. And also we'll cover some of the assumptions and how to handle potential violations of these regression assumptions. But as I said, this course is in itself not a course on regression or statistics, but we'll cover all the necessary tools from the perspective or from the point of view of R that you will need to later on build on this knowledge and maybe do other more sophisticated modeling strategies, or do something which is maybe a different type of dependent variable or a different type of nonlinear relationship. Day four is basically split into two parts. One part is about functions, and also not just how to work with functions, but also how to create and write your own functions. So sometimes in your research endeavors, you might have already encountered cases where you have to do the exact same stuff or something very similar on a large chunk of different data sets, different groups, different subsets of your data. Writing your own functions, and instead of manually coding each and every time what you want to do on these subsets, instead of just feeding them to your own function, is very helpful for that. And also relatedly, we'll cover iterations. That's a typo there, sorry. So for loops and other package-based tools to handle iterations, and how to carry out the same functions and the same tools on a wide range of data sets, tables, or any other input. And also we move on to data visualization, which is often one of the most rewarding aspects of this course, and generally working with R. Like one of the great comeback and so to say the reason why R is still becoming more and growing in popularity in these days is the very robust and strong set of data visualization tools which are at your disposal if you know how to handle R. So this is ggplot2, the, so to say, package ecosystem that we are going to use for data visualization. And already by the end of day four, you will be able to visualize some common patterns, some underlying differences or associations in your data set, which is, as I said, very rewarding and also a very Like, you will only have to write 2 or 3 lines of code, and you will be able to produce the same quality of data visualizations that you would see on, I don't know, 538 or Economist or New York Times. And lastly, on day 5, we move on to visualization for more, where either more sophisticated or less common forms of data visualization techniques. And then we also conclude and wrap up with R Markdown, which is a very nice approach to, as I said earlier, to combine both text and data. So in staying and working in R Markdown, you'll be able to, say, write a research paper, feed in your citations, write your theory section, and then move on to the analysis. And also, while staying in R Markdown, you can run your code there, produce the corresponding visualizations or maybe regression output tables, include them in your research paper, and then eventually generate the whole uh, package or the whole combination of your theory and analysis and visual and tabular output as a PDF, basically ready for submission, be it a journal submission or be it, say, assignment for your university course. So without navigating away from your window, from your R ecosystem, you'll be able to write up your entire analysis, put in the accompanying theory part, and make it formatted very nicely and neatly basically without breaking a sweat. So that's the brief outline. That's kind of like the plan for the 5 days. I'm not sure if there are any questions at this point. I I don't see hands up. So if not, then we would move on to the next part, which is, as I said, I'll make 4 examples, basically based on the materials covered in this course. Um, all of these examples are, so to say, achieved and computed and produced by tools that you will know by not necessarily even by day 5, but maybe even by day 2 or day 3. So the learning curve might seem to be steep, but it's also very rewarding. Basically, you still haven't unpacked your luggage or suitcase in your Vienna hotel or hostel, and you're already be ready to produce, I don't know, regression outputs, group comparisons, and data visualizations. So as a first quick example, I thought we could compare levels of trust and specifically trust in institutions. Now, the question that this slide poses is whether there are differences between um, North Macedonia, so this nice country between Albania, Greece, and Bulgaria, as well as Norway, when it comes to institutional trust and more specifically trust in politicians. So I just selected these 2 countries. Both of them start with N, and both of them are included in the European Social Survey, the ESS dataset, which are, I guess, good reasons for us to compare them. Now I'm from neither, but I do know that, say, in Eastern Europe, institutional trust and trust in politicians often behaves very differently than trust in Nordic or West European states. Anyone has a guess what we will see or how should these patterns play out? Raise your hand or just speak up. It's also great. Or do we have any reason to believe that trust in politicians will be different in these 2 countries? If not, we can conclude the session here and we don't have to do this example.
Yeah, I think there are that kind of reasons, if I may. Yeah, that
Yeah,
in
please.
general in Eastern Europe, if you compare it with Scandinavian countries, then this trust should be lower.
Exactly. Um, and even more specifically, one of the approach we take here is going for, so to say, the country averages or the mean levels of trust, right? So there might be individuals both in North Macedonia and in Norway who are just like, trusting every single individual and every single politician. And there probably are individuals in both countries who are like absolutely disillusioned in any organized political structure, and they have like zero trust in any official. But what we really care about is the country means, in this case, the country averages. So particularly what we are doing here is we are comparing, well, in this case, as I said, it's the European Social Survey. So these are samples of individuals. 2,000, 2,500 individuals are asked in both countries, or maybe somewhat less in North Macedonia because it's proportional to the country size. But basically, you have country samples for both cases. These individuals are asked about their trust in politicians as well as many other questionnaire items. And then we want to say something about the potential differences between these two countries when it comes to the population, right? So we want to infer something about the population differences by the means, the tools which are available to us, which is to test or to compare the samples that we have. So if you're coming from a more natural sciencey or psychological training, or so to say, uh, methodological silo, then this is very similar to a treatment and a control group case. So every individual in this ESS dataset is, well, belonging to one single country, right? So there is no individual whose responses are recorded both for North Macedonia and both for Norway. So we have two independent separate samples, and we want to compare their means, their averages, in order to say something about the potential differences between the population. So for that, I'm just going to pull up my RStudio. This will be very similar to what you will work in during the week on your own computer. Um, Basically, at this point, all you should focus on, and probably the only thing you should care about is the rest will be obviously explained in the course, is that we have the 10th wave ESS dataset. It is originally produced in a SAV format, so this is an SPSS file, or at least this is the SPSS version of the dataset which I downloaded. So as I said, even if, say, your collaborators, your co-authors, or the survey company that works for you are producing stuff in Stata, SPSS, or any other SIS or any other formats, R will be able to handle it, and you will be still able to do reproducible code, which later you can upload to the journal, right? So if you submit your work, usually you have to provide the corresponding code and dataset so others can replicate your findings if they want. But also, if you later export out your modified dataset, subset of this data, or you generated some new variables, then you can also export out in formats which are actually made and generated by R, so they are free and open source and can be loaded in any other programs. So they stop being proprietary data formats. So we have this ESS dataset, as I said, it's 37,000 individuals are asked, about 618 questions. It's a lot of questions, and we don't need all of them, right? We only want to compare the two countries, starting with N, North Macedonia, and Norway. So for this, what I do here, and obviously this will become like gut instinct and then second nature to you by day 3 or day 4, is that I will generate a new subset of this data, which I just created. I just named here MKNO. These are the country codes used by ESS for North Macedonia and Norway. And I only contain individuals there who are coming from these two countries. So it's now a much smaller data set. I'm not sure if you see my cursor, but it's below here. We have like 2,800 or something individuals from these two countries. And all I do is I run a t-test on them. Trust in politicians is the variable we are interested in. If if any of you worked with ESS datasets, you know that ESS has its own, so to say, lingo or dialect when it comes to naming variables. So CNTRY is for country, and this gibberish is basically trust in politicians. So we do a t-test. We are comparing the means of the two groups, which are the two samples from these two countries, using this new data set, which we just generated. So no one else is there, only people from North Macedonia and only people from Norway. And if we run this code, then we get this output. Anyone here in the right side, I just highlighted. Anyone who had previous exposure to statistics is willing to interpret this or willing to give it a go. Like what is the message here? What does this result tell us? Mm, I don't see hands, but just as before, feel free to speak up. Just unmute yourself and um, share whatever like caught your attention or what this result is telling you. If if no one is breaking the ice, then I'll just quickly offer a take on it. So what we know from, or what we could know from the code book, if we would have read it, is that the trust in politicians is the higher the scores are, the higher levels of trust it means. So we are basically offered the group means, the group averages by R immediately. We see that in North Macedonia, this is 2.49 something on this scale, whereas in Norway it's 5.68. Now this does look a huge difference, even just by, so to say, a visual inspection or our first blink. But the associated statistical output here, for such as a very small p-value or a very high t-value, as well as the confidence interval, which doesn't involve the zero in it, are also telling us that with our pre-specified preset confidence, which is in this case was 95% confidence, given this data, we could conclude that in the populations there are some difference when it comes to trust in politicians, and Norway and respondents in Norwegian, and in general, the population in Norway tend to trust politicians to a much higher level than people in North Macedonia. Again, the statistical part is, so to say, less important here. I think the essence of this exercise is that just 3 lines of code was enough to produce a group comparison and was, I would argue, fairly simple to code, and that's something that you'll be able to do on day 2 or day 3, already to have some insight and to see some patterns in your data sets. So this is one example that you could do. I go back to the slides here, and move on to the next example, which we still stick to the European Social Survey dataset, and we are at this point a bit obsessed with this question, which relates to subjective health. So the question asks, how is your health in general? Would you say your health is very good, very bad, or maybe something in between? Again, health can be measured objectively, but this is a social science survey run by mostly sociologists and to a smaller extent political scientists. So they are, of course, less interested in diagnosis. and they are more interested in socio-demographic variables, which might be explaining and associated with your own subjective perception of health. And this is what we could try to do here. Anyone has guesses what could explain subjective health? What could make someone say that they are feeling very bad or that they are feeling very good? Either if you worked with the ESS dataset, or I don't know, if I would ask this question from you, how is your health in general? What do you think would be driving your response? Any any inputs or ideas?
Hi, I would say that definitely age should be a factor here.
Mm-hmm. That's a great insight. And what do you expect? The older or the younger someone is, the like how is it related?
Well, the elder probably the health in general should be assessed as less good.
Yeah, that's probably a fair expectation. Any other demographic or economic or I don't know social variables that might be shaping how someone feels about their health?
Well, in general, the economic wealth, I would say, or the level of income or access to the medical care.
Mm-hmm.
So probably a long list of factors.
So the more, so to say, the more wealthy or the higher income someone has, the better they should feel, right?
Probably that would be our this intuitive assumption.
Mm-hmm. No, that's also a great idea. These are the ones I've thrown in here, and two of them are exactly the ones that you mentioned. So we have age here with kind of like the expectation that Anna kindly shared us. We also have income, but instead of, so to say, the hard income, so the actual figures in dollars or euros, I'm taking the subjective income measure, which is a question about how respondents feel about their household income. That's because basically one of the more recent trends in survey research is that people are less and less willing to talk about, so to say, their hard income and hard figures. So even if you give them bands like, are you earning less than 40K but more than 30K, you get like a lot of missing data, and people are less and less willing to mention and talk about their hard income. So the subjective income, which is their perception of how they feel about their household income, is, so to say, a variable which leaves us with less missing data and more useful responses. I also put in gender and education, as well as the praying, which is measured in a way that how often a respondent prays apart from religious services. There has been numerous studies both trying to prove and disprove that praying has some health benefits. So maybe we can throw this into our model and see how it goes. So I go back to my old trusted RStudio window. One thing we should do is that if you remember from the slides, ESS by default coded it 1 as very good and 5 as very bad. Now that's not very intuitive. Like if the variable is subjective health and not subjective sickness, then higher values should be ideally associated with a more positive, better outcome. So what I do here is I just recode, reverse code the item. So what has been 1 is now 5, what has been 2 is now 4, etc. So that's just a very quick fix to, so to say, make the variable more useful for our own purposes. And then maybe before we do anything else, we could do um, correlations. We could check how all of these variables, so education, age, gender, income, and praying, are related to our dependent variable, which is the subjective health, if at all. It might be possible that none of these variables are related. We just, kind of went with this list of variables for based on our either pre-existing theory for our gut instinct. So I just select out those variables which are, so to say, according to us, might have something to do with subjective health, which is education, as I said, gender, age, praying, and so forth. And with a single line of code, what I could create and what you will be also able to create in the course is what we call a correlation heat map. Now you can see every single cell is denoting a particular association or lack of association between two variables. For instance, health, on a very rightfully suggested, are actually the strongest correlations based on this data set and based on these variables. So the older someone gets, because age is just measured as the plain numbers of how old people are, the lower the subjective health of these individuals tend to be. So the bluer shades are denoting a negative, and the darker blue are more negative correlation, whereas the warmer colors, these reddish oranges ones, are positive relationships. So we could explore this further, but again, as this is not a stats class, so it's more like, so to say, a validity or face validity check before we do anything with it. And I'm just going to create first a variable which is a dichotomous variable for female, because the gender in the current form is not very helpful. 2 is female, 1 is man, so it's not really suitable for a regression framework. Again, recoding and regenerating and creating variables will be, so to say, our every second or third step when preparing our data sets for analysis. So this is just one of these examples. This will be, so to say, very customary or second nature to you by the end of the course. So I created a new variable named female. If you would check the code book, you would see that how ESS coded gender is it's only male or female. So that's all we've got to work with in this case based on this data set. And then I just run a regression model where, again, our goal is still to understand what drives subjective health, right? So this is our dependent variable, which we are trying to predict with a bunch of predictors, independent variables, such as how often people pray, how old they are, how they feel about subjective income, as well as whether they are female or not, and what level of education they have. And if we run this code, then on the right side, we do get, I wouldn't necessarily say nice, but I would say intuitive and helpful regression output. If any of you are more unfamiliar with scientific notations, then I'm just turning this off for you and regenerating the table. And basically what we see here is that all of these variables that we have thrown in to the regression seems to have some association which is fairly significant with the dependent variable. So all of these are fairly strong associations. We are fairly confident that these variables are related. Again, this is observational, so we are obviously not claiming any causal relationships, but we could do some sort of descriptive analysis based on this, and we would indeed see that the worse people perceive their income, the worse they also perceive their subjective health, or the older they are, the worse their reported subjective health is based on this data set. So yeah, this is something we could do. And lastly, what I show you, and then we leave behind our quirks of statistical analysis examples, is how to generate an output which is submission ready. Now, what we have here is, as I said, intuitive but not nice. The variable names are this cryptic nonsense that ESS left us with. I would highly advise against anyone like screenshotting this and pasting it to your, I don't know, submitted version. So all you need to do is, in this case, what I do is I just add country fixed effects because all of these individuals are clustered by countries, right? ESS has 37, 38 countries. So once I have this very same regression with country fixed effects, I will generate a table in LaTeX, but also if you work in Word or you just want plain text file, you can also do that. With this single line of command, so using our regression output and telling R to produce a LaTeX output, we are, so to say, served or offered some LaTeX code. And if you open either Overleaf or your local tech software, then you will immediately see that this code leads you, hopefully you can see it, this code leads you and brings you a very nicely formatted tabular output, basically without you manually specifying cell heights and tables and, you know, doing a lot of superficial efforts to format it. All you can do, and all you need to do is you can, inside R, produce this output, and then you will have a table which you should be proud to submit or send it to your professor or course assignment or anything else. Okay. Any questions on that? I'm just browsing the chat. Yeah. So I don't see any questions at this point. So we move on to the next two examples, which are again examples from various days of the course that that you would see. We'll cover data visualization a lot because thankfully at least how some of the social sciences are moving towards these days is less and less tabular output, so less numbers and more visually appealing, visually helpful, so to say, plots, facets, histograms, patterns, all of them visualized in a way that they are conveying a message effectively without, so to say, throwing all the unnecessary information in a textual format to the reader. Data visualization is obviously good if you use it well. So we'll cover some of the principles, but also mostly what we focus on is how to get from certain analysis or certain data patterns to, with a couple of lines of codes, something effective that you can show. And again, if you want, you can submit or you can send or you can share it with your co-author. So some of the data visualization examples in this course are, so to say, drawn or sourced from the Palmer penguins dataset. It was actually a very cute project. I do recommend you to look it up if you've been not familiar with it before. Basically, there is the Palmer archipelago where three species of penguins live: Gentoo, Chinstrap, and Adelie. And while all three of them are cute, they are somewhat different when it comes to certain body parts and body shapes and weights and which island of the archipelago they are exactly inhabiting. And now some of the people who are more lucky than us academics have been tasked to go to this island and to measure penguins. So imagine those people doing this for a daily living, putting baby penguins on the scale and then weighting them, trying to weight them, and then the baby penguins trying to escape. I think this must be one of the best jobs you can have. Sadly, we don't have this job, but we do have the data, which is the result of this exercise. So we have a lot of chinstrap, Adelie, and Gentoo penguins measured. to the extent that we might even need to reopen a biology book and learn about bill length and bill depth and flipper and all of this stuff. But basically, we have a nice data set about penguins' features. And basically, what we can do is use this data set to visualize certain patterns when it comes to these penguins. So I will just do that very briefly first. So as I said, there is a nice package. Packages are, so to say, optional add-ons, extensions of your R software. This package contains nothing else but the data on the penguins. And as I said, we are going to use ggplot, which is a very powerful suite, all-encompassing, so to say, toolbox or powerhouse of data visualization tools. And as you can see, it's basically 4 lines of code, which is like really nothing. And all I have to do, and that's one of the great advantages of R, is I have to specify the data set, which is in this case the penguins, and say what we are interested in is comparing bill lengths and flipper lengths. So in very layman terms, do penguins which have longer tails have also longer bucks or beaks or mouths? And if we do a scatter plot based on this, then R will immediately help us and produce us a scatter plot. And already that will be very telling that basically if we have a look at this picture, we can see how the range, the values, the observations on flipper lengths are scattered, and also how bill lengths are scattered. And then this is, so to say, the most basic data visualization you could start with. And day 4 will be about, so to say, overlaying certain other aspects, which will help you not just to communicate the big pattern, but also to isolate and to effectively disentangle certain smaller patterns. So this code, which you can see is up until line 4 or 3 are almost exactly the same as the previous one. All it changes, or all it does, is that we want to show with different colors how these penguins are. So are any of these penguin species on average tend to have longer flippers or maybe longer bills or maybe both or maybe neither, while also overlaying a linear regression model lines, so the OLS line on top of our scatter plot. So again, the code is still, I would argue, fairly simple and human readable. And immediately we get some new information. First, we have the overlaid regression line, which kind of corroborates a bit or makes us a bit more confident that penguins with longer bill tend to have longer flippers. But at the same time, the different colors, such as red, green, and blue, which are associated with the different types and species of penguins, Adelie, Gentoo, and Chinstrap, are also telling, because we see that the Adelie penguins are, on average, they seem to be fairly small penguins, right? Short bills, short flippers. The Gentoo are, so to say, the somewhat bigger ones with fairly long flippers and mid-sized or fairly long bills. And then the Chinstrap are somewhat in between. They are also somewhat less numerous if you would, so to say, try to count or add up the numbers. And as I said, the good thing in it is that once you have the very basics, so once you understand how to, say, in this case, generate a scatter plot, then all the additional tweaks, the additional layers, the additional specifications, such as to show patterns by groups, or to omit outliers, or to change axis labels, remove grids, use a different background color, all of these will be like just one extra line of code. And very quickly, you'll get into the experience of producing figures like this. Okay, and last but not least, the example I'm going to show you is something that you might have seen either in online reporting or in, I don't know, public TV and media stations of your home countries. So there are, so to say, Sankey plots, which are designed to show flows from one state or one stage to another. In this case, this is an example from the German Zeit, showing how voters, so to say, changed or what volatility patterns have been characterizing voters between 2005 and 2009. And you see that, for instance, CDU-CSU, which is with the black color, is losing, like bleeding out a lot of voters to many other groups. But so did SPD, the Socialist Party. And the last code I'm showing to you is basically an example that from very scratch, fairly quickly, you can create something similar. So what you will learn in the course is, first of all, how to create vectors. So here I just create a vector of party names. We will have some fictive parties such as Social Democrat, Christian Democrat, Green, Liberals, and also did not vote. We will assign some probabilities. So in election 1, 2025, and election 2021, what proportions, what probability are associated with voting for these parties. So by design, I will make the Social Democrats lose some voters and the Greens gain some voters while keeping, say, no vote or abstention roughly the same. So once we have these, again, simulated, manually created probabilities, we can take a random sample and produce basically data which does look like if we would have sampled actual individuals who voted for actual parties. And the only interesting output that this data is, so to say, offering you is, of course, a Sankey plot, very similar to what we have seen from the site before. And ta-da! This is something that you will be able to generate by the end of the course. So as I said before, I did simulate data purposefully in a way that these two big parties will be losing some votes. And of course, it's a fictive example, and no sane democracy should have this volatile elections where basically a large chunk of each party's voter bases are swapped out or replaced. But I would argue it's a good exercise to try out and to test how to create data visualizations like this. I'm gonna stop with examples here and looking forward to any questions if you have in the Q&A. Please raise your hand and ask your question away. Thanks. If you do not have a question right now, then I just highlight my email address. Feel free to shoot a message there. And also there is a very detailed description of the course on the MethodsNet website. Basically a day-to-day breakdown of what is covered on each day and on each session. So you can also consult that, but you can also reach out to me and ask if you have any, so to say, worries or queries about whether the course is designed or ideal for you, or if, say, if this course is useful with some other combination of another MethodsNet course on week 2, or if the workload is doable with a morning course on the same week. So any similar questions like that, feel free to reach out, please. And I hope to see many of you this summer in Vienna. Thanks.